Hi, everyone. This is Joe Grabowski. Just letting you know that we don't have a new episode for you this week. Instead, we are happy to re air this episode on Chesterton's Marian poetry on today, the Feast of Our Lady of the Most Holy Rosary, formerly the Feast of Our Lady of Victory, which commemorates the 1571 Battle of Lepanto, about which Chesterton wrote his celebrated poem. So we hope you enjoy this episode, and we also invite you to join us today live on YouTube right here. If you're not subscribed to YouTube, if you're getting this in the audio feed, I encourage you to go over to YouTube, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell to get notifications. And at noon Central Time, we will be having a live recitation, praying together of the Rosary with our Francis Chesterton Rosary League, hosted by Nancy Brown. Very happy to be offering this. Great way to celebrate this wonderful feast day, or to familiarize yourself with the Rosary if you're not familiar with that prayer. So we invite you to join us with that and to stay tuned here on this feed, wherever you're accessing this podcast, for next week, a brand new episode of Uncommon Sense. Until then, God bless.
Today, on a special episode of Uncommon Sense, Grettelyn and I celebrate Our Lady of Victory with G.K. Chesterton, looking at a few of his poems and how he celebrates Our Lady's help, leading Christians to victory in battle. Stay tuned. Viewers and listeners, welcome to another episode of Uncommon Sense. I am Joe Grabowski, the VP for Evangelization and Mission here at the Society, joined as always by my wonderful colleague and co-host Grettelyn Darkey. Hi, Grettelyn.
Hi there, Joe.
And as of the date of this is airing on October 8th, 2024. Yesterday, in the Catholic liturgical calendar, was the feast day of Our Lady of the Rosary, which formerly had been the Feast of Our Lady of Victory in the old calendar. We'll talk maybe a little bit about that and where that historical feast comes from. But October 7th is also the historical anniversary of the battle in 1571 of Lepanto, which Chesterton famously wrote a poem about. And so we thought this would be a neat opportunity to dig into some Chesterton, and especially some Chesterton that maybe challenges people, because we're not as much in this modern day and age poetry readers maybe as former generations were. So any initial thoughts before we get started, Grettelyn, on kind of the topic matter and why we're talking about it?
I think it's great. I think it's challenging in more than one way. I think there's sort of common misconceptions about Mary, too, that Chesterton challenges. We had Carrie Grass on our show, and she has a whole chapter in her book on Mary called Our Lady of the Combat Boots. And it's sort of a similar vibe here. We have Mary as she's not like a military leader necessarily, but she's aiding these military men in their battles. And it's a good reminder that she is one of our best resources for fighting off evil and, for getting to heaven. So, Chesterton definitely saw that, I think.
Yes, indeed. Well, I guess maybe we'll start sort of at the beginning, or kind of in the early days. So the two sort of early instances of, this kind of poetic theme in Chesterton are Lepanto and the Ballad of the White Horse. And if I'm not mistaken, both of those were published in 1911. So sort of interesting that this kind of topic and theme material was on Chesterton's mind. It's oddly, not a date you might expect if you think of these two famous kind of epic poems, probably the most famous of the poems that we're talking about today, Lepanto and the Ballad of the White Horse. You might expect that they were written during World War I, or maybe during the Boer War, when Chesterton kind of had war on his mind. But no, they're written ostensibly in peacetime. Of course, we know that there's always, during this period, various forms of unrest throughout Europe, Russia, places like that. But it's kind of just an interesting thing. So we know a little bit of historical background about these things, that Chesterton had by this time started, a close relationship with Father O'Connor, who
Mm.
became the basis of Father Brown. And he kind of, led Chesterton to look at Our Lady's role at Lepanto, and or at least so one account of the story goes. And that Chesterton was just so taken by this that he had to kind of compose this poem. And then, of course, the Ballad of the White Horse, his interest goes beyond Our Lady, but there's a very remarkable role that Our Lady plays in that poem. Anything you wanted to observe about kind of these two? These are the two biggies of the texts that we're talking about today. We'll get into the more obscure material after this, I think. But yeah, what do you have to say about these two?
Sure. Just a comment, even on the date. I mean, I think it's just great evidence that Chesterton was always close to Our Lady, even before his conversion. Um, but yeah, the Ballad of the White Horse, that section is just so encouraging.
Yeah.
I find it to be, there's so many beautiful lines just about, like, Mary just talking to Alfred and telling him, there's that, where's the line? She says, that we don't guard heaven or something. Like, there's not a lock on heaven.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's just this wonderful, reminder that, if you knock, the door will be opened. If you seek, you will find. Um, Not to give up, not to stop trying to get there. The gates of heaven are lightly locked. It's so
Yes.
beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, just kind of a starting thought right there.
Yeah, it it is quite a beautiful kind of admonition, and it reveals Our Lady in this very strong character, um, as she speaks with Alfred. And for those, if you haven't read the poem, I highly recommend it. At the very least, read book one, The Vision of the King, um, of that, because that is where Alfred is sort of broken to the loss of his kingdom. He's basically living in hiding on this island in the river in Athelney, and Guthrum is basically ruling his kingdom. Most of his eldermen have abandoned him, and so Alfred is really brought low by this, and he has this vision of Our Lady, and it's even that is just so beautifully described, right? Because the scene is that he actually first sees his own mother.
Mhm.
He has a vision of his mother sitting in his father's castle, and she has a book, probably illustrated, excuse me, illuminated manuscript of the scriptures, open on her lap, and Alfred is a little boy and looking at it, and he sees this image of Our Lady and Christ, and then the image transposes. It's really well presented, and now Alfred is in that image. He's in that little illuminated manuscript picture, and he sees Our Lady. And but she doesn't give him the kind of pep talk or what you might expect. She speaks as someone who has known defeat and known battle and known the hopelessness or seeming hopelessness at the foot of the cross,
Mm.
except that hopelessness was not allowed to her by grace, right? Because
Mhm.
she could not sin in that way. And so those famous lines that later became kind of super famous and were on the New York Times front page as we entered World War II. I tell you, not for comfort, yea, not for your desire, save that the sky grows darker yet and the sea rises higher. Night shall be thrice night over you, and heaven an iron cope. Do you have joy without a cause, yea, faith without a hope?
Mm.
Um, and just it's one of those great moments in Chesterton poetry. Of course, he's using paradox the way that he always does, because we know that probably one of Chesterton's favorite, it seems to be, as we'll express when we go on and talk about some other things here, the title of Our Lady, Cause of Our Joy, really apparently struck him for whatever reason. It's that's a line in the Litany of Laredo, but there she's saying, "Do you have joy without a cause?" Right? And so it's kind of implicitly saying, "Just look to me, look to me, and I'll take care of you." It's a great exchange.
Yeah. And I love too how it really looks beyond this world. There's we know that Chesterton or C.S. Lewis and Tolkien read the Ballad of the White Horse in the midst of the trenches, most probably. And it's just such a, I don't know. There's something to be said about looking beyond, and I think in both of their writings, you can see it in their fiction, especially. There's this feeling of like if you push through the suffering, you're going to get to better things. Which I don't know. That's just such a important message for all of us.
Yeah, and it reminds me so strongly of this great line in the Lord of the Rings. I think it's in book 3, when they're, I think, yeah, I'm fairly sure it's book 3, when Pippin and Gandalf are talking at Minas Tirith, and Pippin says something to the effect of, "Do you have no hope anymore?" And Gandalf says, "There never was much hope, only a fool's hope." And that idea, the fool's hope, I think, is another thing that is very Chestertonian. I'm quoting from Tolkien there, but there's that great contrast that Our Lady makes when speaking to Alfred about, the men of the East. They predict things. They see the movement of the stars. They have their wisdom. She says, "But you and all the kind of Christ are ignorant and brave, and you have wars you hardly win and souls you hardly save." And it's just such a wonderful kind of, it almost seems like it's a put down, but it's not. It's exaltavi humilis, right? It's that the humble should be exalted. It's just such a deep, and already, again, in 1911, as you pointed out, already a deep, rich Marian theology that Chesterton has.
Yeah. Yep.
I guess we should also note on that subject that, a lot of this also resonates with the later essay, rather late essay by Chesterton called "Mary and the Convert," where he speaks about how Our Lady was something on his mind and part of his Christian life, even kind of before he was decidedly Christian in some ways. Like he says he could never think of the faith without thinking of her. And that's a very interesting thing. So even from an early age, those that are familiar with our prayer card for the intercession of G.K. Chesterton, we speak of his lifelong devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. That might strike people as strange because they know that Chesterton went through periods of doubt. He wasn't even formally really a practicing Christian until, when he meets Francis, kind of later after his teenage years. And this is the explanation for that there had always been this kernel of a Marian devotion in Chesterton from an early age, and you just see it throughout his career. It's a constant.
Yeah, and I have heard that the closer you are to Mary, the closer you are to the church, and the farther you are from Mary, the farther you are from the church. It's just sort of a given that if you she is the, in many ways she is an embodiment of the church. She's a symbol of the church. You got to have her if you want to be authentically in the church.
Yeah, and I think she gives us that right perspective too, because we're, as the church, she's sort of the icon of the church in many ways, but it's not hers. It's, the church, she is disposed to what Christ wills. And so that kind of quiet resignation and trust that you see again exemplified, you wouldn't think that the iconic image of Our Lady of Victory is Mary at the foot of the cross, or Mary of the Pietà holding Christ crucified. But I think it is in a way, because that is the victory. It's seeing victory beyond beyond the ostensible. This is why I think this kind of imagery just fascinates Chesterton and captures him because
Mhm.
of that. It's such a quintessential paradox of the faith
Yeah.
that death is defeated in death, right? And all these things that we uh, are so familiar with from Easter, right? The Paschal mystery, uh, and Mary's role there in quiet resignation and prayer, but also trust and hope. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard it said she won her crown at the foot of the cross because and you get we have the tradition of the Regina Caeli in the Catholic Church, Queen of
Mhm.
Heaven, rejoice, Alleluia, for him you merited to bear, Alleluia, etc. And it's supposed to be, the angel basically who told Mary that Christ had risen. And I just think it's so amazing that even that early, she was called Queen of Heaven, right? So it's
Mhm.
according to our tradition, it's amazing that she hadn't gotten to heaven yet. She hadn't been formally crowned yet, but she was already Queen of Heaven because she'd kind of made it past that gauntlet of the cross, and she was with him. She was there. She was suffering. She was resigned to God, to His will, and that's what got her where she is. So,
Yes, indeed.
yeah.
Well, I want to continue on, because again, we're and hopefully people are as interested in this as it struck us as being. So we're, full disclosure, the reason that this is being made is that we've been kind of thinking about how to mark, this great feast and anniversary. So the next poem that I want to kind of take a look at, probably the most familiar to most of our viewers and listeners. I know that we've aired even on this podcast feed in the past, Christopher Check and some of his thoughts about the great poem Lepanto. Excuse me. And you can find online, Chris's presentation on Lepanto, where he recites the poem from memory. And Chris, being a martial historian, has such a great verve and vivacity for talking about battle, the way
Mhm.
this poem does. But that's the occasion for this. So Lepanto, as I mentioned, was 1571, October 7th, and it is from that victory in battle that we take this feast day of Our Lady of Victory, which later became Our Lady of the Rosary. And that's because, for several reasons, both the Pope in Rome, Pope St. Pius V, and Don John, as the general of the Christian League, uh, had commanded the praying of the rosary ahead of that battle for victory. And so the rosary was being prayed on the deck of the Real and of the other ships in the Christian fleet as they approached the Ottomans. And it was also being prayed in the chapels in the streets of Rome. And it was early on the morning of the battle, before news of the events could ever have reached Rome, that Pope Pius V looked out his window and saw a vision of Our Lady above the battle, granting victory to the Christian West, and he ordered that the church bells be rung
Hmm.
in celebration. So, yeah, any thoughts about either the feast, the battle, or this marvelous poem that Chesterton wrote?
Sure. Yeah, I think one thing to point out, I love your framing there. Thank you. But it is also important. This battle, I've heard it lumped in with the Crusades, and it kind of is. But I think it's important to note that this is a really defensive battle. This is on European soil, more or less, European waters, I guess you could say. But it's not. It's different. So if anybody ever tries to just lump it in with the Crusades and throw it away, don't let them. It's not fair. That's not a fair thing to do with the Crusades anyway. But it's not fair, especially in this point. And as Chesterton so beautifully illustrates throughout the poem, Europe was a mess at this point, completely disunified, mostly because of the split in the faith, uh, and nobody was really paying attention to what was coming from the East and the South, and it really was a moment where it may not have mattered afterwards if you were Catholic or Protestant. You might have just been Muslim in a few years. So it's just a very kind of interesting historical moment, I think. Chris Check, again, does a great job pointing this out in any talk you could probably find for him online. But Just important to know the framework behind this because it is such a key battle that really stopped a tide that would have changed history forever at the very least. So we would not be the way that we are today if this had gone differently. So it's interesting to know the importance of this, the weight of this battle, and really the hopelessness of it. Again, we were at that point too where it was a very small force. They were kind of ragtag, and they could not get help from most European countries. So, yeah.
Yeah, and divided. That's
Mhm.
the. I think that's one of the key ways that you know that this is not triumphalistic. This isn't
Mhm.
Chesterton doing jingoism about the past. As you say, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be read through the Leyenda Negra, the black legends of history that were frankly propaganda of later
Yeah.
eras against Catholicism. That's a whole other story. And I would say you could lump it in with the Crusades because just like the Crusades, as you say, this was defensive action. That's
Mhm.
again something else that could be argued in a different context.
We'll bring Chris Check back on, and then we'll
Yeah,
talk about that.
we'll bring Chris on to explain why the Crusades were indeed defensive, or at least perceived in their time to be defensive and to
Mhm.
be about defense and defense of fellow Christians. But yeah, Chesterton really dwells at length. I mean, the majority of the stanzas are kind of about you know either the enemy and sort of the Muslim supremacy, but then from stanza. Well, I guess it depends how you count the stanzas here, but the stanza of St. Michael's on his mountain and the
Mhm.
sea roads of the north, that talks about the division and in really, really poignant terms. And again, Marian terms, which is interesting too, that one of the things that Christians were divided upon or had become divided upon is the role of Our Lady. And so he says very poignantly there, uh, referring to kind of the internecine struggles and the inquisitions and things. Christian killeth Christian in a narrow, dusty room,
Mm.
and Christian dreadeth Christ that hath a newer face of doom. That's referring to sort of the Calvinistic uh, Christ of judgment and predestination that Chesterton had such an antipathy towards. And then Christian hateth Mary that God kissed in Galilee. And just the poignancy of that one line. How
Mm.
could you, you know, this is the mother whom the Christ child doted on as any infant, as any toddler dotes on his mother.
Mm.
And so, at the very least, to revere and respect her for having had that unique place in his human affections, right? Um, so Chesterton really cuts right to the heart of sort of one of the problems here, of this sort of neo-Nestorianism that seems to plague us in every age for those who accuse Catholics of Mariolatry. Um, yeah. Any other thoughts about uh, this poem or favorite lines, favorite images?
Oh, that's hard. There's a lot that's great in here. I think I love the part about Cervantes at the end, is one of
Mhm.
my favorite parts. But yeah, just the idea of, if you wanna make a schoolboy mad, what do? You say something mean about his mom. Like,
Yeah,
why would you do that to Christ? I don't know. It's so that's such a prescient line that you brought up. But yeah.
yeah, and it's. I'm thinking of these things too. Like there's little subtle things that Chesterton is doing in the poetic imagery too. I don't know how much of this is intended or if it just kind of serendipitously or providentially kind of rhymes. But you know, the Virgin Queen of England is on the
Mm.
throne.
Mhm.
So Elizabeth, and he calls her the cold Queen of England, not the Virgin Queen.
Right.
And then of course you have um, I don't know if Doña Juana is alive at this time, but the mother of King Philip of Spain,
Mm.
Charles V's wife who was mad in her old age and blaspheming and just like terrible, but not deliberately. And she did supposedly convert
Mm.
on her deathbed. I think it was actually Saint Francisco Borgia who
Mm.
received her final confession. But you have these kind of mother images, and then of course there's again the paradox that Chesterton loves is that Don John or Don Juan of Austria, was essentially an orphan, but
Mm.
not an orphan for good cause, an orphan because he was illegitimately conceived, and then sort of his biological mother was paid off, and then he was sort of housed with this one family for a while, and then taken away from them, and then kind of had a mother figure who uh, he got removed from when he was moved to court. So Don John kind of never had that in his life, and so it is said that he, though, received a very strong Marian devotion from his longest mother, the sort of second mother that he had, I guess third, not including his biological. So yeah, it's just a lovely kind of testament to, again, she's there, she's in the background. It doesn't necessarily, this poem doesn't necessarily dwell on the role of Our Lady as much
Mhm.
as the others do, but given the occasion, I think that it's kind of between every line, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, for sure. She's in the background. As she likes to be, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with those covered, I just wanted to kind of maybe point out to viewers and listeners two other exemplars of this kind of idea in Chesterton of Our Lady of Battles and Our Lady of Victory that you might not be as familiar with. And the first would be the Queen of Seven Swords, which is this great sequence of poems. And I really, really can't recommend this one highly enough. We just read it recently with my local Chesterton Society. And there's a whole little book called The Queen of Seven Swords that just has some other really beautiful selections in it. A Little Litany, which is Chesterton's treatment of the Litany of Loreto, is highly recommended. But yeah, Grettelyn, what has been your familiarity with this particular poem, The Queen of Seven Swords, or the sequence, The Queen of Seven Swords?
Sure,
And
yeah.
what do you think about it?
So I had encountered this through Maria Romine, who has also been on the show a few times.
Yeah.
And it's out of print, so it's a little hard to find. Maybe we can put it on the list for ACS books or something.
Right.
Um, but it's an amazing little book, and I was taking it to prayer with me for, boy, I just took my time with it. So it was months and months and months. And oh, it's so fruitful. I would highly recommend if you can get it, or if you could even just get it on your phone, it's on our website, as is all of Chesterton. It just has such a beautiful, it can really get you deep into Marian theology. And it's so fun because if you love Chesterton, it's through his eyes. So yeah, I think actually my favorite part of it is that what you said, Joe, the little litany, because
Mm-hmm.
we said that as kids after the Rosary, and so I know all those titles very well, and it was just sort of beautiful to see Chesterton's uh, his thoughts kind of unwinding on some of those. It was really cool. Yeah. What about you? What struck you the most?
Well, I do love that one because of it. I love that one because of its beauty. The Little
Mhm.
Litany. Um, Although interestingly, the one kind of title that doesn't even seem to be alluded to in that particular poem is this you know cause of joy, that is the one image that pops up everywhere else. But it does come up in the book. It comes up at the very end, the title poem of the book, The Queen of Seven Swords. And you might be mistaken because the way the table of contents for the poem is listed, it says the Queen of Seven Swords, and then the next poem is St. James of Spain, and on it goes. But it's really all one sequence. It's one piece, and the way you can tell this is that the poem, The Queen of Seven Swords, starts out, "I had dreamed of a desolate land," and then if you flip all the way to the end, where he goes through the seven, what he calls the seven champions of Christendom, and then all seven of them speak together. The very last line is, "I awoke, and the sun was bright," and so it begins with a dream in a desolate land, and then waking, and the sun is bright. So this whole thing is kind of this dream sequence, which is really interesting, and it takes a bit of work. I'm not going to lie about
easy.
that. It's not an easy.
No.
It's as dare I say, obscure as any of Chesterton's poetry gets. Because it does have this sort of dream logic to it, and it has kind of these stark images that aren't really explained. But I do love to go ahead.
No, just obscure references too.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be nice to have annotations for this one.
Yeah, but I do love a few lines in the middle of the opening sequence, the as I say, the title poem, The Queen of Seven Swords, where he says, he's talking about this desolate vision that the poem opens with, how Earth is desolate and everything is, he says, blackened and broken, etc. But he says, "Erect in the earth's despair and arisen against heaven interceding, whose name is cause of our joy, in the doorway of death she stood. The seven swords of her sorrow held out their hilts like a challenge. The blast of that stunning silence as a sevenfold trumpet blew." And just that image of Our Lady kind of standing up and calling for, defense of the truth, defense of her son's honor, and doing so with kind of the seven sorrows, the seven swords of her sorrows, this traditional image of those sufferings that Our Lady went through now being the very weapons by which the soldiers of Christ should go and defeat the enemy, because that is the weapon, right? By uniting ourselves to the cross, and by the one victory that Christ achieves in the cross, we also achieve victory. So, just that transposition of and I love that he goes right from the name, cause of our joy, and then mentions the seven sorrows. So he connects these ideas so closely. It's just, it jumps out at you on all these pages.
Yeah, well, and it's been said that when Mary presented Jesus to Saint Simeon and he made the prophecy that all her joys from there forward turned to sorrows, but then when Christ rose, all her sorrows turned to joys. So there definitely is sort of a back and forth, I think, there that Chesterton captures just absolutely beautifully. But I also love just the sort of chivalric image that possibly is what caught Chesterton so early with Mary. I mean, she is the ultimate sort of womanly woman who could, and she's in this poem especially, she's calling her, like you said, she's calling her champions. She's inspiring them. She's like the reason that they want to fight. They're going to stand up for the truth, for what's right. And, it seems like men throughout the ages have sort of needed that, and women have, at their best, provided that. They sort of provide this reason to do the right thing, and then men at their best rise to that occasion. And that's like this whole poem.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the chivalry point. That's something we really should call out strongly, is that, it's all over Lepanto, for example. He calls Don John, he calls him the last knight of Europe, and then he says the last and lingering troubadour. That's two chivalry images right there in kind of one stanza. of that poem, and then of course ending with Cervantes and Don Quixote. So yeah, chivalry and the chivalric image is all over that poem in particular, but I think all over really all of them. Even in Alfred's discourse with the Queen, with Our Lady, rather, he calls her Queen. And there's a lot that you can read into that of kind of a standard kind of chivalric discourse with the knight and his lady taking place. So that's a really good call out there.
Yeah, interesting too that, Frances has a lot of Marian poetry, GK's wife, and hers mostly focuses on Mary as the mother. Mary's this nourishing kind of motherly figure. And you see that in Chesterton's as well, but it's much more the lady. She's like the lady, that of chivalry that sort of calls men and calls the knights to do their duty. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Gosh, what else could be said? Well, it's interesting about this poem, or this book, The Queen of Seven Swords, that it is released in, or published, I believe, in 1926. December of 1926. And, that's the year that Francis Chesterton eventually follows GK into the church, and it's after a visit. I've been trying to research this. This is a long-term project of mine to try to trace the influence of this period that Chesterton spent in Spain of that year, 1926, in Catalonia. And I believe on that trip, I have suspicion that he also may have journeyed to Gibraltar. And there's actually at Gibraltar a shrine to Our Lady of Sorrows, or a church chapel to Our Lady of Sorrows that was very damaged at the time. Still not fully rebuilt after some damages from natural disasters, but also I think World War I had left some impact as well. So just that kind of the gateway, because he talks about Our Lady standing up in the doorway of death. And I wonder, because it's sort of that, it really, the place of Gibraltar in Chesterton's imagination would not have been slight. It would have been a big kind of geographical site for him, because it's kind of the gateway of the Muslim versus the Christian world at the time. So
interesting.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on those, on other material out of the Queen of Seven Swords? I mean, there's, again, just tons. It's a gem. It really is a gem if you can.
Yeah. It is really thick. I think it is one of those things that you have to take it slow and like read one piece at a time, and then just sit there and chew on it for a while. I guess just from like an actual, like, again, we've talked before about Chesterton's poetry kind of gets better and better as he gets older. And each one of these little pictures, so it's broken up in like different saints for different places. So St. James of Spain, St. Denis of France, St. Anthony of Italy, St. Patrick of Ireland, St. Andrew of Scotland, St. David of Wales, and of course St. George of England. And each and every one of those it's just 3 stanzas, but each one of those, they sort of have a mirror for each other. So they're all super similar in some ways, that not super similar because they're different, but they all have a similar form, I guess I should say. And I don't know. I think from actually like a poetry analyzation standpoint, this is very interesting. And I haven't done like a lot of analysis on it, but I think it would stand some really interesting analysis, because it is like the first stanza is like the setup about kind of what the problem, what the saint is like seeing. And then there's like some action in the middle section, and then the last stanza is a call on Our Lady, and it's just this beautiful. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's very thick, but it's this beautiful structure that sort of frames each one of these. and yeah, and beautifully in some ways captures like the spirit of the country that he's trying to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. And the travails of
Yeah.
the country in many ways, arguably, except Wales. I think his one about Wales just seems to be praising Wales. I don't know, but but the rest of them seem to be reflecting something going wrong in the current climate of the age. Um,
Mm.
but the Welsh weren't always very well treated by their
Mhm.
neighbors, so he could be indexing some of that. But it's a great, well structured poem, and it merits, just as the rest of the poems in that book do merit reading. And again, to watch for the influence of that trip that he had just taken to Catalonia. He has the poem in there about the Black Virgin,
Yeah.
where he actually makes explicit reference to the trip. So he was clearly very moved by the kind of Latin Mariology, right?
Mm.
The Latin churches, or the Latin parts of the church, Latin cultures within the church, their approach to Marian devotion, which I think is different than, even when Our Lady of Walsingham was very well celebrated. Probably it's just not quite as exuberant and as, let's say, I don't know, emotional as probably the kinds of processions. And you can look on YouTube and see like these things where they dress up, statues of Our Lady, and then a bunch of guys dressed up and they race them down the street. I have no idea what it's about. I don't understand the cultural custom, but it's still kind of cool, that they're like
Yeah.
racing their Madonnas down the street. So I do want to just cover the very last of our sort of poems that we're recommending and commending to people to read in honor of this feast day, and really throughout this month, because October is in some ways dedicated to Our Lady of the Rosary and to Our Lady's role. And so I would we would be remiss not to mention this other one, which again, as of the airing of this podcast, we just sort of celebrated this one in an event last night with some of our Knights of the Apostolate. And if you're not a knight and you'd like to attend things like that and get access to these special events, you could join us today. We'll put the link in the show notes in the description to become a knight. But this is the arena that he wrote after his visit to the University of Notre Dame in 1930, where he attended a Notre Dame football game in Indiana. That's not University of Notre Dame in Paris. I don't think there is a University of Notre Dame. There's University of Paris. It's probably dedicated to Our Lady because everything is over there.
They certainly don't have football.
They do not have
our kind.
football. No. And yeah, this one, what to say of it? It's just so remarkable. It's clearly, it's later in his career, 1930, so it's the latest of the examples that we're talking about, and I just think he's gotten almost too good. He's so good.
It's really good.
Yeah, it really is. So we won't, no spoilers if you haven't read it. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, but essentially just Chesterton contrasting the gladiatorial arenas, the combat arenas of the pagan Rome, and possibly the martyrdoms of in the arenas of pagan Rome, with now the bloodless battle of new gladiators, honoring not the emperor but the queen overlooking them from the dome at the University of Notre Dame, the golden statue of Our Lady. It's just really, really rich. Anything specific you want to say about it, Grettelyn?
I just saw a line and I want to read it. Where to go? Something about, oh, here we go. So there's the gladiator reference. There's he talks about those about to die salute thee, which is what the gladiators would say to the emperor before they fought, and then he has juxtaposed to those about to live salute thee to the queen Queen Mary. Youth untroubled, youth untutored, hateless war and harmless mirth. That's football. Like, what a great description. I don't know,
Yeah.
hateless harm, and it's just beautiful. I think it's sweet. I think it's very I don't know. There's such a like you said, it's so good because there's so much depth here, but there's such a sweet innocence to it as well that is just charming. I love it.
It really is. And just, I could spend just hours talking about this one alone. It has just these great little allusions, just the little lines where he calls what's going on in the football arena. Uh, he talks about holier bread and happier circus.
Mhm.
Which just in one line, it takes the breads and circuses of Rome and now juxtaposes them with the Eucharist and football. And
Mm.
just tell me any other poem, tell me any other poet who, in the economy of language in one line has ever done that before, and
Mhm.
put them together and sees how they fit together. So even if you're not a football fan, even if you're not this is American football that we're talking about. Even if you're not a fan of that, first of all, have some respect for the greatness of Newt Rockney's leadership at the University of Notre Dame and the great things achieved there. But also just give it a read and enjoy it. Just let the kind of cadence of it and the joy of it. It really does kind of have about it that atmosphere of the movie Rudy, when his family finally gets to Notre Dame, even though they've never seen a game at the stadium, and they finally get there and they just see the spectacle of it all. You can imagine G.K. Chesterton just in awe of this spectacle that he's seeing there.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's so Chesterton, right? Like you said, that line about the Eucharist and the football. It's like, we have the bread of angels and we can have fun. Those are kind of
Yeah.
like the two pillars of Chestertonian Catholicism, right? We are blessed beyond measure. We are encased in the playground and now we can play. So it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Captures that so nicely.
And you could really just imagine him as you read through it, like the way he saw, and this is what we strive to do here at the society in many ways, is to help ourselves and to help the world, hopefully see the world with a little bit of Chesterton's vision, to see the world a little bit with that aptitude for paradox and that aptitude for, you know, seeing things upside down, seeing things you've seen 1,000 times, but seeing them for the first time. And so you really just get that. You get that here, where you imagine this guy and you just see football in a whole new way. Something we've seen probably too much of by now in our history.
Yeah.
And yet, just to see it afresh and what he saw and just the delight he's taking in this, as he's, this uh, harmless mirth, as you call it, like this battle that's not deadly, but, there's a lot of stamping and yelling and hitting and all this stuff going on. And he's so tickled by it. So
Yeah.
highly, highly recommend. Any last words, Grettelyn, on kind of our theme for the day? This was a different episode for our viewers and listeners. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed talking about this. But yeah, last thoughts on the theme before we wrap up?
Yeah. I guess, just to appeal to our listeners, let us know if you like this kind of thing. We'd love to do more of it. And I don't know, let us know what your relationship with Mary is like, or if you have one.
Mhm.
But also just in general, I mean, look up these poems if you get a chance and actually read them. They are so delightful, and yeah, you can really refresh your fall with these. I think they're just a wonderful way to spend a nice crisp evening and reading Chesterton poetry.
Absolutely. Well, I can't say better than that. I mean, please do let us know in the comments if you have a favorite among these poems, if you've heard of any of these, if you haven't heard of them. If there's other ones out there that we didn't mention that are maybe your favorites, please let us know. Of course, please pray for us as we will pray for all of you, and especially in this month of October, we would ask that you ask Our Lady's intercession under the title of Our Lady of Victories, Queen of the Holy Rosary, and cause of all our joy. And until next time, remember, Chesterton is always better with friends. God bless.